Today we're going to be talking about a principle that you need to use when you're traveling to a new city and you want to see if this is a city you want to move to. I have traveled to over 50 cities and lived there across the USA. If I liked it a lot, I would stay for a long time. If I didn't, I would move on or pass through. And I've been doing this for a couple years now and really have a real strong sense of how to really scope out a city. I'm not claiming I'm an expert, but I have more experience and knowledge in this and pushing through anxiety and trying these out than most people. So I thought it could help someone to share this experience. At the very least, it could be entertaining to hear this short story I want to tell. So in this story, I want to talk about a particular place I was in. And in this place, it really illustrates this concept well, although I've experienced this in other cities and towns. But the principle I want to talk about is when you are scoping out a city or something, depending on the region you choose, it really has a drastic shift on your perspective of the city, just based off sometimes a few blocks or few areas you're in, because there are nice areas, there are not so nice areas, and that difference can be quite large in some cases, and usually you don't really know about this or you consider it as much as you should. Like, I knew that, okay, places like Atlanta had different regions that were sketchier or not as sketchy, but even though I knew that, I didn't know how much of a impact this has. So to sum up this tip in one sentence, it's try living in multiple different regions in the area if you can. So for me, I did Airbnbs in different regions in the same city. Or if you can't afford to do that or you don't have the time, just really do your research and then choose a nicer area that you think would be great. So let's get to the story. So this one was in Colorado Springs. Now, I chose this place because of the stark contrast. Colorado Springs is a great place. It's almost more of a vacation-y or outdoorsy place in Colorado. And people in Denver usually will go drive 1 hour south of Denver to Colorado Springs if they want to take a short vacation, a road trip, and check out the beautiful state park with all these orangey rocks called Garden of the Gods. One of my favorite places in Colorado. And by the way, I didn't know any of this until I went to this travel adventure. But my point is, the first place I stayed in Colorado Springs was not bad, but it was secluded. I didn't know it at first, and so this is the mistake you would make if you don't follow these things, which is you go into a place, you live there, and you assume this is how Colorado Springs is, or this is how this town is. When in fact, it's because of just the juxtaposition of the neighborhood you're living in and what's nearby in the vicinity and so forth. So the first place I was staying wasn't terrible. The inside of the Airbnb I was staying was kind of nice, but it was kind of in a weird place where it was almost like a mini artificial neighborhood or suburb, a very tiny one that was wrapped around this giant motel. And this hotel had these giant buildings and infrastructure, and it was almost like everyone was just like living in front of this hotel. There's even like a guy next door, a neighbor, who was like, barbecuing, or just like sometimes he would just sit on his chair on the driveway looking at this giant motel with these giant infrastructures. It was kind of like, I can't even remember, but it was almost like those motels you would see in Las Vegas, where they're just giant, and then they branched out sideways, and there's like multiple angles, so it was like a T-shaped. And I was like, okay, this is kind of, I guess this is Colorado Springs. And around that area was just a bunch of random grocery stores and gas stations, and I figured, this is kind of how this place is. It's a tourist town. And then, while I was there, I would go to the gym. I would go explore the area, and I thought this was just kind of how life is there. The gym I went to which was Planet Fitness. I choose Planet Fitness because that's really the only gym that has this like international and national presence almost anywhere. Like you can go to a small town and they'll have a Planet Fitness there, and the membership will work. Probably the only gym in the US that really has this national presence. So anyhow, I go to the Planet Fitness there, and it's kind of a little bit ghetto sketchy too. You drive into the shopping center it's in. There's a huge parking lot, but most of it's empty. There's a bunch of random spots in the store, but those look kind of empty. Some look kind of like they closed down. And then you go into the Planet Fitness, and it's large and spacious, but you know, it's certainly not the most posh Planet Fitness you've seen. I've seen some really posh ones and some sketchy ones. It's crazy how the range of Planet Fitnesses are so different depending on the state you're in or the city you're in within that state. But the point is, it wasn't like super sketchy, but it was kind of like reminiscent of the Planet Fitnesses in Charlotte, which were kind of just like, they weren't great, but they weren't terrible, and there's just this like energy there where it was kind of like dead. Like the lights were kind of dim, like almost like, you know, white light, and there was like a lot of space. So it was kind of, the equipment was kind of spaced a bit far apart, and then the people in there were just kind of like, you couldn't tell if they're passing through or locals, but there weren't a lot of them in there. The energy there was just like dead. It's crazy how, like, you know, it's kind of like that. And you're like, okay, this is how it is. You know, a few adults in here, not really that sketchy, but not really that like fun energy either. It's like, you know, they're just kind of like, you know, living life. You know, maybe these are tourists passing through, you don't know, but it's just kind of this dull energy in there. And now we get to the point of the story where things shifted. My time in that Airbnb ended, but I liked Colorado Springs so much that I extended my stay and booked another Airbnb in another place. And this is when things shifted completely around. Now I was in this really nice neighborhood, like a legitimate neighborhood. It reminded me of the neighborhoods in Maryland and Virginia, where it's kind of posh. You know, everyone has their house, and it's a nice house. There's like brick foundation. The gardens are very curated and manicured. There's grass everywhere. And even off in the distance, this was new. You don't see this in Maryland. You could see the canyons and mountain ranges a bit from your house, and then the sun would hit those, and it'd have this nice orange glow. And there's houses on either side. And you could see, like, this would be a nice place to raise a family. Like, there's kids would be trick-or-treating. So from the get-go, it was really nice. I walk into the house, and it was nicer than my previous Airbnb. You know, there's a huge living room area. I had my own a room upstairs. It literally felt like I was in, you know, back in some nice, you know, house mansion that I saw a lot in the Maryland, DC, Virginia area. It was quite well furnished too, well decorated. It was fantastic. They even had a large kitchen, and it was well lit. Whereas the previous one, it was kind of dimly lit. Even if you turned on all the lights, it still had this kind of like darkish feel to it. And so just like small things like the lighting made a huge difference. And all of a sudden I was like, oh wow, this is nice. The last area, a bit, you know, a little bit, you know, kind of dilapidated, but still nice. But now I'm out of the tourist area. It turns out like this whole place isn't a tourist area. There's people living here. And then, you know, I went to explore, travel, visit Garden of the Gods and other nearby tourist spots, some local parks, some things local would go to. And I had a different Planet Fitness that was closer than the previous one. And this one, lo and behold, was much nicer. And the people in there were a lot different. It was packed, but it had this young, thriving energy because there was tons and tons of college students flowing through. Now, did I like that it was that packed? No. Were the college students a bit standoffish? Some of them were, some of them weren't. The point being, this one it just had a different energy to it. Like, literally, I was squatting at the rack, and there was like multiple people waiting for me to finish. And there's almost this pressure there. This guy there was like, this adult was almost like, you know, he was kind of respectful, but also kind of like pushing it because it was such a busy place. He was like, oh, let me know when you're done. And he was literally just standing there waiting for me to finish for the next 10 minutes, like putting on the pressure because there was just so much people there. But in a strange way, I kind of liked it. You know, I would rather have this young energy where there's all this flow of people, all this, you know, potential in them. Who knows? That could be a doctor, that could be a lawyer. They're going to school. They're trying to live their life. They're trying to get it at the gym. They're, you know, on it. Versus, you know, the kind of slow, dead, almost despairing energy that I mean, I felt going to those others. Not to say that the other people felt the same way. They may have been fine there. And it was just a completely different feel. That Planet Fitness was also in like a poshier area. I wouldn't say it was really posh, but it was nicer than some other areas. And it really just goes to show you how a difference of, you know, a few, you know, probably less than like 5-10 miles made in terms of the energy and the life you have. So really scope out the neighborhoods and regions you go to before you decide that a city or town isn't for you. It really could just be a matter of a few neighborhoods that make a huge difference. And that was just one of the starkest stories I saw. But you know, I see the same thing in other cities and towns. And it also gives you a sense of like some certain things you should look for in terms of the energy you prefer. Everyone has a different feel. Some people may want the more slow-paced, dead, empty kind of energy because they're trying to retire and they're not trying to be bothered. For me, I kind of like that kind of young energy. The sun was still there, even at like 7 a.m. 7 p.m. people were getting it at that gym. It was a little too crowded for me, but I still preferred that to being too dead. And you'd certainly see that in various other cities and towns. Scottsdale, Arizona, probably some of the nicest Planet Fitnesses I've ever seen, and a really nice young energy flowing through the whole town and city while you're at those Planet Fitnesses. Frankly, some of the worst Planet Fitnesses I've seen were in Charlotte, and maybe, you know, some parts of Maryland, or I mean, okay, to be fair, there's some other ones in other states as well, that were just kind of like kind of gritty, like, you know, like the energy was really slow and like they were just done with life, or I don't know what it was. It was just like too empty, too dimly lit. It didn't have that warm energy, it didn't have as much sunlight passing through. And so you almost felt like after work when you would go to it, you almost felt like, oh, like a zombie, like this is my life. And maybe it was, even with those, you know, maybe if I just gone to a different Planet Fitness or place, it would have made a difference. And I would say there is some truth to that, because in Charlotte, while I didn't go to other Planet Fitnesses there, I went to a Orange Theory inside the city, and that was a bit more alive. It was a bit too, like, you know, step by step, and everyone's just kind of in their own head, like a bunch of young people there, but, you know, a bunch of finance guys and girls just going through the motions. But there's so many different energies and cultures and feels. You know, I was at a similar type of Orange Theory thing in Austin, Texas, but this one was run by a, you know, in-person business, a small, like, local business, and that had a different feel to it too. The instructor had a different feel. So different places, gyms, watering holes, common places people pass through, give different energies and vibes and feelings based off the people in it, the infrastructure around it. And so really try that out. You know, Atlanta is another huge one where, you know, just depending on the region you live, you can have a different experience of the area. I lived in this kind of secluded neighborhood down in Decatur, and that had a different feel than when I was living kind of further up north. And it just makes such a difference. The people you're around, the infrastructure, the culture, the feel of the place, and it can have a huge impact on the perspective of a place. I just hate it when someone goes to like Vegas and they say they hated it, and that was because their experience of Las Vegas was just like very touristy. But that's just one perspective, one avenue of Las Vegas. Like if you got to live the local life, live in the suburbs, try out the pickleball courts, try out the amazing food, realize the low cost of living, it may have a different feel for you. and it may not be as trashy or touristy or whatever versus the kind of posh areas of Las Vegas where you can just jump onto a park and play pickleball with a bunch of friends. So it's such a variance of things, and unfortunately most people will never realize that. Most people will just take their first judgment of a city and go with it. And that's why I tried out so many different regions and cities in different places. And the last example I'll give was New York City. You know, I thought it would have more of that lively, fun, youthful energy that, you know, you may see when you go to a gym in like Florida or California. But you know, at least the gyms I went to or tried, they're more like they're called Blink or Crunch Fitness. Those ones had a kind of industrial feel to it. Maybe it's because they were kind of cheap gyms, but like you would go there, they'd be filled to the brink with men trying to, you know, make it on a budget, and you have to wait in line for equipment. It was probably one of the worst gym lesser, I wouldn't say worse, but lesser satisfying gym experiences I've had, where, you know, I'm like, is this gonna be my life? Is this really the New York City dream? You know, waiting in line just to, you know, have a turn at this basic gym equipment and this machine, and there's just a ton of other dudes here, and the whole place is like not even that nice, and it's just a very routine life, and everyone just kind of looks kind of dead. It was just like, that's not the gym for me. Not saying New York's not for me, but it really just depends, you know. So many different factors. So don't make conclusions about a place before you've really tried out different angles about it. And yeah, that was my story. You know, if I could go back in time and tell my younger self something, I would tell that, because, you know, my younger self probably went to those gyms in New York, had that New York life, and was like, oh, really, I thought this might be my dream, and it really kind of sucks, and just concluded that New York's not for me. Whereas maybe that's just one avenue of New York. Maybe instead of the low tier gyms, you try out something else, you get a feel for it, and you get a different experience of New York. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.